Hi everyone, welcome back to English Speaking Hub. Today I want to go through some of the most common mistakes I hear from English learners again and again, no matter which native language they speak. If you've made any of these mistakes yourself, don't worry, you're in very good company. Let's go through them one by one, and I'll explain exactly how to fix each one. Today's episode is a little longer than usual because there are so many useful examples I wanted to include. So grab a coffee, get comfortable, and let's dive in properly. Part 1. Mixing up make and do. Let's start with one of the most common mixed up pairs in English, make and do. A lot of learners use these two verbs almost randomly because in many other languages, one single verb covers both meanings. Here's a simple way to think about it. We generally use make when we are creating or producing something. For example, make dinner, make a decision, make a mistake, make plans. We generally use do for actions, tasks, or activities that don't necessarily create a physical object. For example, do homework, do the dishes, do a favor, do exercise. Unfortunately, English doesn't always follow a perfectly logical pattern here. So some of these combinations really do need to be memorized individually, almost like small chunks of vocabulary rather than logically calculated every time. Let's look at a few more examples to really cement this. We say, make an effort, not do an effort. We say, make progress, not do progress. We say, do business, not make business. We say, make a phone call, but do some research. I know, it doesn't always feel logical, and that's okay. A helpful tip? Instead of memorizing make and do as separate word lists, try memorizing common full phrases together, like make a decision or do the laundry as single units. That way, the correct verb comes out automatically without needing to think about the rule at all. Here's a small exercise you can try right now, pausing the episode if you'd like. Think of your day yesterday and try to describe 3 things you did using either make or do correctly for each one. Did you make breakfast? Did you do some exercise? Did you make any big decisions? Part 2. Confusing since and for. Next, let's talk about since and for, which learners very commonly confuse when talking about time. Here's the simple rule. We use for with a length or duration of time. For example, for 3 years, for 2 weeks, for a long time. We use since with a specific starting point in time. For example, since 2020, since Monday, since I moved here. A common mistake sounds like this. I have lived here since 5 years. That's incorrect because 5 years is a duration, not a starting point. The correct sentence would be, I have lived here for 5 years. Or alternatively, I have lived here since 2019, if you want to mention the specific starting year instead. A simple trick to remember this. If you can answer the question, how long? Use for. If you can answer the question, since when? Use since. It's also worth mentioning that both since and for are usually paired with the present perfect tense. I have worked here since 2018, or I have worked here for 6 years. Because we're talking about something that started in the past and continues into the present. Try this. Think about something you've been doing for a while. Learning English, living in your city, working at your job, and make 2 sentences about it. One using since and one using for. That small bit of active practice makes the rule stick much better than just hearing it explained. Part 3. Overusing very instead of stronger words. Here's a slightly different kind of mistake. Not exactly wrong, but definitely something that makes your English sound less natural. Overusing the word very. A lot of learners rely heavily on very to make basic adjectives stronger. Very big, very tired, very happy, very good. This isn't grammatically incorrect, but native speakers often use a single, stronger word instead, which sounds much more natural and more advanced. For example, instead of very big, you could say huge or enormous. Instead of very tired, you could say exhausted. Instead of very happy, you could say thrilled or delighted. Instead of very good, you could say excellent or outstanding. Instead of very scared, you could say terrified. Instead of very hungry, you could say starving. Instead of very cold, you could say freezing. This doesn't mean very is wrong to use. It's still completely normal in everyday conversation. But learning a few of these stronger alternative words can genuinely make your English sound noticeably more fluent and more natural, especially in more formal or descriptive situations. A fun way to build this vocabulary: next time you catch yourself thinking very plus an adjective, pause for a second and ask yourself, is there a single stronger word for this? Over time, this becomes a really natural habit, and your vocabulary grows almost automatically. Part 4. Wrong word order with adverbs of frequency. Let's move to a grammar-focused mistake. Incorrect word order with adverbs of frequency. Words like always, usually, often, sometimes, and never. A common mistake sounds like this: I go always to the gym on Mondays. In English, adverbs of frequency usually go before the main verb, not after it, and definitely not directly before a location like to the gym. The correct sentence would be, I always go to the gym on Mondays. Here's the general pattern: subject, then the frequency adverb, then the main verb, then the rest of the sentence. There's one important exception though. With the verb to be, the frequency adverb usually goes after it, not before. For example, she is always late, not she always is late. So the placement depends slightly on which verb you're using. But the general pattern for most action verbs is adverb before the verb. The same pattern applies with helping verbs too. For example, I have never tried sushi, not I never have tried sushi. The frequency adverb goes right after the helping verb have and before the main verb tried. Let's practice quickly. How would you correctly say this? She usually wakes up early. Notice, usually comes before wakes, the main verb. Now try making your own sentence about something you usually, often, or never do on weekends. Part 5. Using the present simple instead of present continuous. Here's another very common one: confusing the present simple and the present continuous tense. A common mistake sounds like this: I study English right now, when the speaker actually means they're studying at this exact moment. The word now, combined with an action happening at the moment of speaking, usually calls for the present continuous tense, not the present simple. The correct sentence would be, I'm studying English right now. Present simple, on the other hand, is generally used for habits, routines, and general facts. For example, I study English every day, which describes a regular habit, not something happening at this exact moment. A simple trick: if you can add words like right now, at the moment, or currently naturally to the sentence, and the meaning still makes sense, you probably need the present continuous tense, not the present simple. This mix-up also shows up with certain state verbs like want, know, like, and believe, which usually stay in the present simple even when talking about right now. We say, I want a coffee right now, not I am wanting a coffee right now, even though right now is present. These verbs describe states, not actions, so they usually break the normal pattern. Part 6. Mixing up say and tell. Let's add one more grammar point that trips learners up constantly: the difference between say and tell. The general rule is this: tell is usually followed directly by a person. Tell me, tell him, tell her. While say is usually not followed directly by a person. If you want to mention who you are speaking to after say, you need the word to. Say to me, not just say me. So we say, she told me the news, not she said me the news. But we can say, she said the news to me, or more naturally, just she told me the news. A quick way to remember: tell likes to be followed by a person directly. Say prefers the thing being said, or needs to before the person. Part 7. Confusing countable and uncountable nouns. One more very common mistake: treating uncountable nouns as if they were countable. Words like information, advice, furniture, and money are uncountable in English, even though similar words might be countable in other languages. A common mistake sounds like this: can you give me an advice? Or, I have many furnitures in my apartment. Both of those are incorrect because advice and furniture don't take a plural S and don't usually take a or an directly. Instead, we say, can you give me some advice? Or, can you give me a piece of advice? And for furniture, we'd say, I have a lot of furniture in my apartment. Or, I have several pieces of furniture. The good news is there's a fairly short, learnable list of these tricky, uncountable nouns in English. Things like information, advice, furniture, money, news, and luggage are some of the most common ones worth memorizing early on. Part 8. A story about making peace with mistakes. Before we finish, I want to share a short story that I think puts all of this into perspective. A former student of mine kept a small notebook where she wrote down every single mistake she ever made in our conversations. At first, this felt discouraging to her. The notebook kept getting longer and longer, and she told me it sometimes made her feel like she wasn't improving at all. But after a few months, I asked her to look back at her very first few pages. She was genuinely surprised. Many of the mistakes from those early pages had completely disappeared from her speech. She simply didn't make them anymore, without even actively trying to fix them one by one. What had happened was natural: gradual improvement through consistent practice and exposure, even though it hadn't felt that way day to day. That notebook, which once felt discouraging, became proof of just how much progress she had actually made over time. I think that's such an important lesson. Mistakes aren't a sign that you're failing. They're simply a normal, visible part of a process that's usually working, even when it doesn't feel like it in the moment. If you want to try something similar, you could keep your own small notebook or even just a note on your phone, and every so often look back at what you wrote a few months ago. I think you'll be surprised by how much has quietly changed. Quick listening check. All right, let's do our quick listening check before we finish today. Question 1. Which word do we use for a duration of time, like 3 years, since, or for? 4. Question 2. What's a stronger, more natural alternative to saying very tired? Exhausted. Question 3. What tense should you use for an action happening at this exact moment, like I blank English right now? Present continuous. I am studying English right now. Question 4. Is advice a countable or uncountable noun in English? Uncountable. We say some advice or a piece of advice, not an advice. Question 5. Which verb, say or tell, is usually followed directly by a person without needing to? Tell, as in tell me, tell him, tell her. Great job if you got most or all of those. That's all for today's extended episode of English Speaking Hub. We covered make versus do, since versus for, overusing very, word order with frequency adverbs, present simple versus present continuous, say versus tell, countable and uncountable nouns, and a story about making peace with your own mistakes along the way. Remember, every single one of these mistakes is incredibly common, and noticing them is actually the first real step toward fixing them. You don't need to fix all of them at once. Just pick 1 or 2 to focus on this week. Thanks so much for listening, everyone, and thanks for sticking with me through this longer episode. See you in the next episode of English Speaking Hub. Bye for now.